Hi, this is Maya Cruz, and this is my attempt on a bad podcast to discuss the article by Claire Kane Miller, Young Men Embrace Gender Equality, but They Still Don't Vacuum. That itself is pretty snarky, and I kind of like it because I have a little animosity towards the fact that household chores are the only aspect of gender inequality that we have failed to progress in. So moving forward from that, I'd like to discuss what felt most important to me in this article, and I think it was honestly the general concept, which is that young people today are so open-minded, and we are open-minded to attitudes about pronouns, politics, and sports, so we become very woke, as people would say, and this is the only kind of area that we're still struggling in, and I find that very interesting, and I wonder why, which Miller doesn't really explore why this could be why this certain aspect of gender inequality has not progressed, but she does announce surveys, and she does talk about many other interesting thoughts on gender inequality that we will get into later. But I want to now discuss why this concept matters in my life. And I think that when I was younger, this was something that was always very existent in my thoughts and kind of a problem in my home, I feel like. I grew up in a family of 6, in which 2 were men and 4 were women. So I had my 3 other sisters and my mother, or my 2 other sisters and my mother, forgive me. And then I had only 1 brother, and I had 1 father, as most people do, but it was just my brother and my father and us 4 girls. And I just remember having so many chores that were expected of me and my sisters, and so little in comparison that my brother had to do. In fact, he really only had 1 chore, which was taking out the trash. And there are many times where I would get into arguments with my mother because I would ask, why can't my brother do this? Like, what is the difference? And I was just very confused, and I didn't understand this kind of institutionalized gender inequality at that point yet. But this was definitely reasoning for my awareness in it, but the answers were always just worry about yourself and so forth, and never really got too into it. But these were arguments that I remember having very often with my mother, and it was something that always bothered me because I just couldn't understand why women were to wash the dishes and women were to serve the men, because in my home we were to serve the men, and often my mom would serve everyone else before she did, and every single time we ate dinner, my father and my brother were served first, so the men in the house were prioritized. And me and my sisters were expected to clean bathrooms and scrub floors, and there was just an extensive list of chores that were expected but not expected of my brother, and I just wanted to know why. So exploring this article was very interesting to me because I got to understand that this was not just something that was existent in my home, and it is unfortunate to understand that this is an ongoing problem. and that we have not progressed very much in this aspect of gender equality. In addition to that, it is also important to me because I would like to make sure that my home is much more progressive in this sense. I hope that, I think I have the power to make sure this happens, but I want to marry someone that has no problem cooking and no problem washing dishes and no problem vacuuming when there needs to be vacuuming, and just breaking down this idea that women are meant to do household chores, or even if both the man and woman are working, women are expected to pick up the slack in the house or in our home. And I hope to derail or debunk that ideology in my future home. And that's something that's really important to me because the odds of me having all girls or all boys are very slim, so I think that it's going to take an extensive amount of effort to make sure that there is that equity in my home, that there is that dispersion of chores, and that, my daughters are not washing the dishes just because they're girls, and that my son's not taking out the trash just because he's a boy. To continue on, I'd like to touch a little bit on one of Miller's quotes, which is, "If young people can't even envision a model of what men's time at home might look like, that's evidence that our beliefs about gender are really strong and sticky." So I think this brings me directly back to my mother in my household, that just could not even envision my brother cooking dinner for the entire house, or doing anything for that matter besides taking out the trash. And I think that itself is the huge problem that Miller's referring to, is that if you can't even imagine, being specific to my childhood, my brother, practically same age as me, same capacity and capabilities to do this work, you can't even envision that person to do things such as wash the dishes or make dinner or do anything that a woman is expected. We are in a very, very tough spot, and we are in serious danger of not progressing and moving past these ideas that certain jobs and certain forms of labor are meant for women. This brings me to a similar concept from another class, sociology, international relations, with Dr. Backer. We've discussed society during feudalism, that transition from feudalism to capitalism, where there was a point where reproductive labor being household chores, were equivalent, and none meant less than the other, and it wasn't necessarily a woman's job. There were men that were doing reproductive labor too. It was just, at that point, they were just two different jobs. And then there came a point where capitalism emerged, and women were basically degraded and devalued for the benefit of silencing society and just making I don't want to get too into that whole concept and timeline, but there were certain economic crises going on that led to women being devalued and debunked, and ultimately reproductive labor became devalued and meant nothing and became not even a job. So this meant that women who were often in reproductive labor or exercising reproductive labor had no jobs, and their job became to just do house chores but with no payment. And I think that is very relevant to what Claire Miller discusses in her article, that there are men and women in households, both parents or both people in that couple that work same amount of hours, equal job, but the woman comes home and she does more household chores. And I'm really curious to explore why that is. I'm sure that there is some research out there that explores why women in households, when both the man and woman are working, are the ones who pick up more of the slack at home. She talks about the Gallup survey, and it did not ask how people wanted to divide chores. Perhaps they were content with the arrangement. It's not realistic or efficient to equally divide all tasks, and it's not always based on gender. Research on the same-sex couples has shown that one person tends to do more at home and less at work once they have children. But in opposite-sex couples, it's very often that the woman doing the bulk of domestic duties, especially related to children, even if she has a career. Making relationships more equal inside the home could have far-reaching effects outside of it too. So ultimately, Claire is proclaiming that this, which some people would see tiny problem within a home, is actually a societal issue, because generalizing it, it's still gender inequality. It's still women, for some reason, expected to do more work within a home because it is a home. And for affiliation with the woman is always affiliated with the home, and it just shows that we still have things to work on in regards to gender inequality. We still have ideologies to progress in the sense of gender inequality. So from my understanding, Miller is saying, yeah guys, great, we've done this and this and this, but let's not forget what we have to work on and what still needs improvement to get to a state of absolute gender equality. Thank you. I hope that was not too torturous of a podcast. It was my first time. Thank you.